The morning fog hung low over Naval Station Norfolk, veiling the vast fleet of destroyers, frigates, and aircraft carriers in a ghostly haze. The air was heavy with the scent of salt, diesel, and tension, a mixture only Navy veterans could recognize. Captain Ryan Cole strode briskly across the steel deck of the USS Valkyrie, boots clanging against the plates with authority. His jaw was tight, his gaze sharp. Today was not a day for mistakes. The latest training exercise had gone awry, and the aftertaste of failure fueled the temper simmering just beneath his composed exterior. "Cole," barked Lieutenant Sanders from the starboard side. The gunnery drills were off by 6 degrees. "That's not acceptable." Ryan's eyes flicked to the lieutenant, his voice cutting like a blade. 6 degrees? We're Navy professionals, Sanders. Precision is everything. How many times have I drilled this into you? His hands flexed involuntarily, the muscles in his forearms tensing as he paced. The crew watched silently, sensing the storm building around their captain. Before Ryan could continue his verbal barrage, a firm voice interrupted him, calm, precise, and laced with authority that wasn't entirely familiar to him. "Excuse me, Captain, but your critique is unfocused. The crew needs guidance, not intimidation." Ryan froze mid-step, staring at the figure in front of him. She was a woman in civilian attire, her dark hair neatly pulled back, sunglasses perched on her nose, and an air of unwavering confidence that demanded attention. Something about her stance, the way she held herself, perfectly balanced and unafraid, caused a ripple of unease in the air. "I'm sorry," Ryan said, trying to mask the flicker of irritation. "And who are you to question my command?" The woman tilted her head slightly, her voice cool and steady. "I am someone who expects accountability. Leadership isn't about yelling, it's about results. And your team is underperforming because they fear you, not because they're incapable." The crew shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered among themselves, glancing from Ryan to the stranger. The man who had never been questioned on deck now felt a prickling unease crawling up his spine. Ryan's face flushed crimson. His hands clenched into fists. Years of commanding authority had never been challenged like this, especially not by someone who had just walked onto his ship. "You have no right to speak to me like that," he growled. "I have every right," the woman replied, her tone devoid of intimidation, but dripping with the sort of certainty only decades of experience could provide. She took a small step closer, enough to challenge his space without violating protocol. "And I suggest you consider how you address your subordinates." For Ryan, the world seemed to shrink around him. A mix of anger, humiliation, and instinctual authority surged in him. In a moment of pure frustration, he grabbed her arm and slammed her against the steel bulkhead of the ship. The sound of the impact echoed, and the crew froze in collective shock. Time seemed to slow. The fog outside the deck felt thicker, more oppressive. Ryan's chest heaved, a flush of adrenaline making his fingers tremble slightly. He expected a scream, a shout, perhaps even a subordinate to leap forward in protest. Instead, the woman adjusted her jacket smoothly, brushing imaginary dust from her shoulders, her expression unreadable. Ryan's eyes widened as the glint of gold insignia emerged from beneath her jacket. His mind refused to process it. "No, that can't be," he whispered almost to himself. "I'm Rear Admiral Elena Torres," she said, her voice calm but filled with a weight that made the words resonate like cannon fire. "And Captain Cole, you just assaulted your commanding officer." A wave of silence swept across the deck. Sailors froze in their tracks, some turning pale, some unable to look away. Whispers started bubbling. Disbelief, shock, and awe mingled together. Ryan's legs felt heavy, rooted to the spot. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. His hands dropped to his sides. The blood in his face drained, leaving him feeling hollow and exposed. The authority he had wielded without question for years now seemed fragile, almost laughable. Every strict command he had ever barked, every reprimand delivered, suddenly felt trivial compared to the magnitude of the mistake he had just made. Torres didn't shout, didn't demand punishment immediately. She simply looked at him, her gaze penetrating, assessing. There was no malice in her eyes, only the sharp clarity of someone accustomed to seeing human frailty in stark relief. "You need to understand, Captain," she said slowly, "that leadership is measured not by intimidation or fear, but by respect earned. Today, you failed." Ryan could barely breathe. His mind raced, spinning through the possibilities. Court-martial, demotion, the end of a career painstakingly built. Yet even amid panic, a small, reluctant admiration stirred. This was not a woman to fear in the usual sense. This was someone whose presence alone commanded the deck, the crew, and even him. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice to remain steady. I apologize, Admiral Torres." It was. His words faltered. The usual rehearsed lines of authority felt hollow. A mistake. A severe mistake. The Admiral nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Acknowledgement is the first step toward accountability, Captain. But that alone does not absolve you." She stepped back, her posture composed, yet every movement radiated command. "You will report to my office immediately. I expect a full explanation of your actions, and an understanding of how you will prevent this from happening again." Ryan's crew remained silent, their eyes darting between the two figures. The fog that had cloaked the morning now seemed symbolic, an ominous shroud over the fate of their captain. Each sailor felt the tension in the air, realizing that what had just happened wasn't just a personal mistake. It was a lesson in humility, authority, and consequence. Alone on the deck, Ryan felt the full weight of what had just occurred. For the first time in his career, he was no longer the unquestioned authority. For the first time, he was vulnerable, exposed not just in the eyes of his crew, but in the eyes of someone who could end everything he had worked for. Admiral Torres, meanwhile, moved with deliberate grace toward the ship's ladder, pausing only to glance back. Her expression was unreadable, but the message was clear. She commanded respect, and she would see whether this captain could rise to meet it or fall under the weight of his own pride. The crew watched in silence as the Admiral disappeared below deck, leaving Ryan standing alone, the enormity of the moment settling into his bones. This was no ordinary day. This was the beginning of a reckoning, a test that would define not only his career, but his character. And in that heavy, fog-laden morning, Captain Ryan Cole realized that for the first time, he was no longer in control. The news spread faster than wildfire across Naval Station Norfolk. By midday, whispers had transformed into a chorus of disbelief. Captain Cole slammed an admiral against the wall. Even the most seasoned sailors paused mid-task, unable to shake the shock of the story. What was normally a routine day at the base had become an extraordinary spectacle, a collision of pride, authority, and raw human error that no one could ignore. The word court-martial hung in the air like an unspoken threat, and Ryan felt its weight pressing down on him, heavier than any steel deck he had ever walked. Captain Cole paced his quarters, boots clicking sharply against the polished floor. He had always prided himself on control, precision, and discipline. Now, for the first time in his 15-year career, he felt utterly powerless. The room felt smaller than usual, suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in. Every memory of authority, every time he had disciplined a subordinate, every time he had issued a command with absolute certainty, now seemed like a fragile illusion. He had underestimated the consequences of anger, underestimated the consequences of misjudging a human being who could outmatch him in both rank and will. Admiral Elena Torres, meanwhile, faced her own storm. Though she had long expected resistance from men in uniform, she had not anticipated such a blatant act of physical aggression from a high-ranking officer. Her team in Washington had already begun raising concerns about potential fallout, suggesting that Cole's actions warranted dismissal. Some even implied that her decision to remain on the ship and personally oversee the matter could be seen as leniency, perhaps weakness. Yet she had no intention of letting the Navy sacrifice a potentially valuable officer without a chance at redemption. Torres had once walked a similar path. Years ago, as a young officer, she had confronted a superior about safety violations during a critical operation. The act of defiance had nearly ended her career. She had spent sleepless nights wondering if her own judgment had been reckless, questioning whether her sense of duty was worth the risk. Standing now before a crew that stared in silent judgment, she recognized the same fire, the same stubbornness and pride in Captain Cole. She did not admire the act of violence, but she understood the mix of fear, frustration, and ego that had led to it. By afternoon, Ryan had been summoned to meet with a board of officers in the administrative building. The hallway felt longer than usual, echoing with the sound of his boots against the metal floor. Every step was accompanied by a creeping dread, a reminder that the career he had built with sweat and sacrifice might collapse in mere minutes. His hands were clammy, and his usual confidence had evaporated entirely. Inside the conference room, the air was thick with formality and tension. The officers sat behind polished oak tables, papers and files spread before them. At the head of the table sat Admiral Torres, composed, her eyes sharp and unwavering. Ryan stepped forward, saluted automatically, and waited for her instruction. He had anticipated anger, but her expression was unreadable, a carefully calibrated balance between authority, disappointment, and something else he could not quite name. "Captain Cole," she began, her voice calm but precise, "I am aware of your actions earlier today. Slamming a superior officer is not only a violation of protocol, but a breach of the trust placed in your rank. Do you understand the gravity of what you have done?" Ryan swallowed, nodding, his throat dry. "Yes, ma'am. I let my temper get the better of me. I take full responsibility." Torres studied him for several long, tense seconds. "Acknowledgement is necessary, Captain, but it is not sufficient. I need to understand why you acted this way. Not for excuses, but for clarity and accountability. What led to your loss of control?" Ryan's gaze fell to the table, fingernails pressing into the wood. He thought of the failed drills, the crew's whispered complaints, the surge of humiliation that had coursed through him as his authority was questioned. For a moment, words failed him. Then slowly he spoke. I thought she was interfering with my orders. The crew was watching, and I felt challenged. I reacted instinctively. It was wrong, and I know that now. I let pride and frustration cloud my judgment. I failed." Torres's eyes softened slightly, just enough to show she recognized the sincerity in his confession. "You must understand, Captain, that leadership is not about asserting dominance. It is about fostering trust and ensuring that your crew believes in you without fear. You have a history of competence, but today your judgment faltered. How do you intend to prevent this from happening again?" Ryan's mind raced. Every solution he could imagine sounded inadequate. Finally, he said, I need guidance, training. I need to prove that I can lead without letting anger control me." Torres leaned back in her chair, considering him. Her decision was risky. Letting an officer who had just assaulted her remain under her command could be seen as scandalous. Yet she saw potential, raw, flawed, but redeemable. She would give him a chance, not out of weakness, but because she believed that some officers, even the most stubborn, could grow stronger through adversity. "Very well," she said finally. You will serve directly under my command aboard the USS Valkyrie. For the duration of our upcoming deployment, you will report to me personally. I will observe your leadership, and I will determine if you are fit to continue as captain. This is not a reward. This is an opportunity, one that many officers would not receive. The words struck Ryan like a lifeline, tossed into a stormy sea. Relief mingled with lingering shame. He had not been dismissed. Yet he knew this was not a reprieve from consequences. It was a gauntlet. Every decision he made, every command he issued, would be scrutinized. Failure was not an option. Not anymore. As the meeting concluded, the officers filed out, leaving Ryan alone with Torres. The Admiral's gaze lingered on him, quiet but piercing. Captain, she said softly, consider this your first lesson. Pride can be a captain's greatest strength and his deadliest weakness. Remember it. Ryan nodded, his heart still racing, aware that this moment would remain etched in his memory forever. Walking back to his quarters, he passed the crew silently observing from the hallways. Their eyes measured him, some with doubt, others with tentative respect. No one said a word, but Ryan felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him, heavier than any storm at sea. Alone, he leaned against the bulkhead, taking a deep breath. The humiliation, the fear, the adrenaline, it all collided in his chest. But for the first time, he recognized something unfamiliar: humility. Acknowledgement of mistakes, the courage to face them, and the willingness to learn from someone stronger than him. This was the start of something different. Something dangerous, yet necessary. Change. Outside, the fog had begun to lift, sunlight breaking through the gray haze. It was a small, symbolic reminder that clarity could follow confusion, that even after misjudgment and pride, redemption was possible, if he was willing to earn it. And somewhere in the corridors of Norfolk, the Admiral watched him leave, silently assessing whether this flawed, stubborn man could rise to meet the expectations of both the Navy and himself. For Ryan Cole, the days ahead promised challenge, growth, and perhaps the chance to prove that a single mistake did not define a man's character, but only if he survived the lessons it would bring. Rear Admiral Elena Torres sat in her private quarters aboard the USS Valkyrie, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating gently beneath her feet. The chaos of the day had settled into a quiet tension, but the weight of her responsibilities pressed heavier than ever. For the first time in years, she had been forced to confront the potential consequences of someone else's mistake, Captain Ryan Cole's mistake. But beneath that, she found herself reflecting on her own past, the long and turbulent path that had brought her to this point, and the lessons she had learned the hard way. Years ago, as a young lieutenant, Torres had been assigned to a critical mission during a high-stakes operation in the Persian Gulf. She was sharp, skilled, and determined to prove herself in a field dominated by men who often doubted her abilities. Her superiors had tested her patience, questioned her judgment, and dismissed her insights repeatedly. But Elena had a fire that refused to be extinguished. She took risks that others wouldn't, challenging decisions that could cost lives if left unchecked. On one fateful mission, she had defied a superior officer to ensure the safety of her crew during a dangerous maneuver. The operation succeeded, but not without cost. The maneuver violated strict protocol, and her insubordination was noted. She had been reprimanded, passed over for promotions, and whispered about behind closed doors. Some colleagues called her reckless, others called her a liability. Only a few understood that her actions had saved lives, but recognition had come slowly, grudgingly, and never without scrutiny. Now, years later, she saw that same fire in Ryan Cole. His mistake today, slamming an admiral against the wall, was born not from malice, but from pride, frustration, and a desperate need to assert control. It reminded her painfully of herself as a younger officer, defiant, stubborn, unwilling to bend, and unafraid of confrontation, even at personal cost. She had once been in his shoes, walking a fine line between courage and recklessness. Torres knew the Navy was a political institution as much as it was a military one. Washington would scrutinize her every decision in the coming weeks. The board would question why she had not immediately dismissed Cole, why she had assigned him under her direct command, and why she had allowed a man who assaulted a superior to continue serving. The whispers were already beginning, the suggestions that she had played favorites, the insinuations that her judgment might be compromised. She could have silenced them, could have removed him entirely from command, but she chose differently. She saw potential in Ryan, a talented officer, flawed and impulsive, yes, but capable of learning from his mistakes. She recognized the rare opportunity that lay before both of them, to turn a moment of catastrophic error into a lesson in leadership, humility, and accountability. Elena's thoughts drifted to the first time she had faced a critical decision that could define her career. She had been 28, the youngest officer in her unit, and she had watched as her superior made a call that would have endangered the entire crew. Against protocol, she intervened, redirecting the operation. Her actions had saved lives, but she had been punished for defying authority. The sting of humiliation and the slow climb back to recognition had taught her resilience. She had learned that leadership demanded patience, empathy, and the ability to see beyond the immediate, to assess people not just for their mistakes, but for their capacity to grow. That same patience would now be tested with Ryan Cole. She had to decide how far she could push him, how much guidance he required, and whether the lessons she intended to teach would be absorbed or ignored. If he failed, it would reflect on her judgment, her career, and possibly the safety of the ship and its crew. But if he succeeded, it could transform him into an officer who understood the weight of authority, the importance of restraint, and the meaning of true leadership. The Admiral recalled the faces of sailors she had once commanded, men and women who had doubted her because of her gender. She remembered the nights spent writing letters to her family, detailing the challenges she faced, questioning whether she was making the right choices, and wondering if she would ever earn the respect she had worked so tirelessly to achieve. Elena knew that respect had to be earned, not demanded. Authority without understanding was empty, and power without compassion was dangerous. Torres glanced at the framed photograph on her desk, a picture of her young teen during a deployment in the South China Sea. She remembered each face, each story of resilience, fear, and courage. That memory reinforced her belief that leadership was about more than rank or discipline. It was about the human element, understanding the fears, motivations, and ambitions of those under her command, and using that understanding to guide, teach, and sometimes protect them. Turning her thoughts back to Ryan, she realized that his arrogance was tempered by skill, and his impulsiveness was paired with courage. He had the makings of a great officer, but only if he could recognize the line between boldness and recklessness. Today's incident had been a failure of judgment, but failures could be lessons if approached with honesty, accountability, and a willingness to change. She intended to push him into that space, whether he liked it or not. The Admiral's aide entered quietly, handing her a folder containing Cole's service record, disciplinary history, and performance evaluations. Elena skimmed the documents, noting his achievements, several commendations for precision, a reputation for tactical brilliance, and a loyalty to his crew that was unwavering. But there were also minor incidents, moments of insubordination, flashes of temper, and a pattern of risking confrontation rather than seeking counsel. The pattern was familiar. She had been there. She knew that the line between brilliance and disaster was often drawn in a single impulsive act, like today's. Elena closed the folder, her mind settling on a plan. Ryan would remain on the Valkyrie under her command. The upcoming deployment would be rigorous, anti-piracy drills near Guam, humanitarian operations in the Philippines, and several high-profile training exercises with NATO allies. Each mission would test him, his skill, his patience, and his ability to follow orders under pressure. She would observe him closely, intervening when necessary, but allowing him to learn from both successes and mistakes. She also knew the human element would be key. Ryan had pride, but pride alone could not sustain leadership. He would need mentorship, guidance, and moments of self-reflection. She would create situations that challenged his authority, questioned his assumptions, and forced him to confront his impulses. Only then could he grow into the officer she believed he could become. Even as Torres prepared for the next day, a small voice inside reminded her of the stakes. Washington would not forgive errors lightly. The Navy's political machinery would scrutinize every choice, every decision she made regarding coal. Yet she felt no fear, only a quiet certainty that leadership was tested in moments of crisis, not comfort. Ryan's mistake was significant, but it was not irreparable. It was an opportunity for him, for her, and for the ship they would both serve. Finally, she stood and looked out through the porthole at the endless expanse of the Atlantic, waves glinting under the afternoon sun. The sea was both beautiful and merciless, a reflection of the Navy itself. Elena Torres understood the challenges ahead, the scrutiny, the political pressure, the personal trials. Yet she also recognized the potential for transformation, the rare chance to mold an officer who could one day command with wisdom and courage. She exhaled, steadying herself. Ryan Cole would either rise to meet the challenge or falter under its weight. Either way, the next weeks would define both of them. And as the Valkyrie prepared to set sail on its first deployment together, Torres felt the quiet anticipation of a story that had only just begun. A story of mistakes, mentorship, resilience, and the unpredictable nature of human character. The past had shaped her, but the future, and the young captain under her command, would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. The USS Valkyrie sliced through the Atlantic waves, its steel hull vibrating with the rhythm of engines honed for war and resilience. On deck, the crew moved with practiced precision, but beneath the surface, tension simmered like a storm waiting to break. Captain Ryan Cole had returned to duty under the watchful eye of Rear Admiral Elena Torres. Every step he took, every order he issued, carried the weight of yesterday's humiliation. Every sailor aboard the ship was aware that the man who had assaulted Anon, Admiral, was now serving directly under her command, a scenario fraught with potential conflict and humiliation. Ryan had learned early in his career that respect was earned through action and example. But now, respect was something far more fragile. Torres' presence was not only commanding, it was unsettling. She moved across the deck with a calm authority that defied intimidation, yet her gaze seemed to assess every action, every misstep, every flicker of pride. The crew whispered among themselves, unsure whether to admire, fear, or pity the captain whose authority had been publicly challenged. Their first day at sea began with routine drills, navigation exercises, damage control simulations, and gunnery calibration. Ryan barked orders, precise and sharp, as he always had. Torres, standing silently at the edge of the deck, corrected minor errors with quiet precision. She never raised her voice unnecessarily, but the crew felt her scrutiny in every measured word. Ryan bristled at first, resistant to any perceived challenge to his authority. Each suggestion, each correction, felt like a subtle critique of his capability. By mid-morning, frustration had reached its peak. Ryan called a halt to a navigation drill after a slight misalignment in the ship's heading. He rounded on a junior officer, prepared to deliver a scolding worthy of his former unchallenged authority. Torres intercepted him. "Captain," she said, voice calm but cutting, "the misalignment is minor. Your crew is learning, not failing. Consider how your response affects morale. Ryan's jaw tightened. The old instinct rose, to assert dominance, to prove himself unassailable. But Torres' steady gaze held him in place. There was no threat, no anger, only authority refined by experience. He found himself pausing, realizing that the reaction he wanted to unleash would undermine the very respect he needed to regain. The first weeks at sea were a trial by fire. Anti-piracy exercises near Guam tested their operational readiness. Ryan and Torres clashed repeatedly over leadership philosophy. He believed in decisive, uncompromising command. She believed in measured, strategic guidance. Their arguments were subtle, tactical, often unfolding in the captain's cabin or on the bridge, each word a battle in a war of influence. Yet even in conflict, a grudging respect began to emerge. Ryan noticed the sharp clarity of her decision-making, the way she anticipated outcomes, the patience that tempered her authority. Torres observed his courage, his loyalty to the crew, and the glimpses of intelligence behind his impulsive decisions. One night, the Valkyrie anchored near the Philippine archipelago for a humanitarian mission after a typhoon. The crew worked to deliver food, medical supplies, and aid to remote villages. Ryan, usually all command and formality, moved among the sailors and civilians with an intensity that surprised Torres. She watched him assist a young boy across a swollen river, ensuring his safety with careful attention. His hands were strong but gentle. His authority was unquestionable, yet it had shifted from intimidation to protection. Later, on the deck under the stars, Torres approached him quietly. The hum of the ship and the gentle lapping of waves provided a rare moment of calm. "You acted well today," she said softly, breaking the silence. Ryan looked surprised. "I did my job," he replied, trying to mask the vulnerability in his tone. "You did more than that," she said. "You protected people without asserting power over them. That is leadership. Something you need to understand deeply if you hope to regain your crew's trust and your own confidence." Ryan was silent, staring at the horizon. For the first time, he realized that leadership was not about winning arguments or maintaining absolute authority. It was about trust, responsibility, and moral courage. He felt the weight of her words settling in, heavy but enlightening. The days that followed brought new challenges. The Valkyrie intercepted a suspicious vessel suspected of illegal arms transport near Guam. Ryan was tasked with tactical command of the boarding operation, while Torres oversaw the mission from the bridge. The crew looked to Ryan, measuring his decisiveness, while Torres observed quietly. Ryan's orders were precise and effective. The operation succeeded without incident, and for the first time, the crew murmured their approval, rather than gossiping in shock or fear. Despite success, tensions remained. The contrast between Ryan's instinctive, aggressive style and Torres' calculated, measured approach created friction. Each decision, each command, was a subtle negotiation between authority and respect. Both leaders learned from each other. Ryan began to temper his impulsiveness, weighing risks and outcomes more carefully. Torres recognized the value of decisiveness in critical moments, understanding that some situations demanded bold action, even at personal risk. Even during brief moments of leisure, the tension lingered. Meals in the mess hall were quiet, punctuated by polite exchanges and sideways glances. Crew members were hesitant to speak freely, fearing misinterpretation or reprisal. Ryan found himself reflecting on past mistakes, humbled by the presence of a superior officer whose experience and wisdom outstripped his own. Meanwhile, Torres observed subtle shifts in his behavior, the way he listened more, questioned less, and considered the human cost of every decision. A week into the deployment, a minor mechanical failure in the engine room tested both leaders. Ryan initially wanted to assert authority, ordering immediate action without consulting his engineers. Torres intervened, guiding him to assess the problem, listen to reports, and develop a strategic approach. The repair was successful, and Ryan realized that restraint could yield better outcomes than aggression alone. He nodded silently to himself, acknowledging a lesson learned under pressure. By the end of the first month, something remarkable had begun to happen. Mutual respect was forming, subtle but undeniable. Ryan recognized the depth of Torres' experience and the wisdom behind her calm authority. Torres saw the courage, skill, and underlying integrity in Ryan, a flawed officer capable of growth. Their interactions, once filled with tension and conflict, now carried a cautious collaboration, a tentative trust that promised future stability. One night, as the Valkyrie sailed through calm seas under a silver moon, Torres found Ryan on the deck alone, staring at the stars. She approached quietly, the soft sound of her boots on steel barely audible over the gentle lapping of waves. "You're learning," she said quietly, her gaze on the constellations above. Ryan glanced at her, surprised by the rare note of approval. I hope so," he admitted. "Hope isn't enough," Torres replied. "You must prove it, every day, through action, decision, and integrity. The crew will follow only when they trust you completely, and that trust must be earned, not demanded." Ryan absorbed her words, feeling the weight and truth behind them. The lesson was clear. Leadership was not a static title. It was a daily trial, a test of character, courage, and empathy. As the Valkyrie continued its journey across the Pacific, both leaders understood that the weeks ahead would challenge them in ways neither could predict. Their conflicting styles, past mistakes, and the immense responsibilities of command would collide with the dangers of the sea and the expectations of the Navy. But for the first time since the incident at Norfolk, Ryan felt a spark of possibility, a chance to redeem himself, to grow into a leader worthy of his rank, and to earn the respect of the woman who now watched him more closely than anyone else. The crew, unaware of the deep lessons unfolding on deck, continued their routines, each sailor sensing a shift in the air. Something fundamental had changed aboard the Valkyrie. The captain was no longer merely an authority figure. He was a man learning to balance courage with restraint, ambition with empathy, and pride with accountability. And the Admiral, quietly observing, knew that this transformation would determine the course of not only one officer's career, but the very culture of the ship she commanded. In the heart of the Pacific, amid the endless expanse of sea and sky, the stage was set. The Valkyrie would face challenges that tested skill, courage, and morality, and at the center of it all were two officers, once at odds, now bound together by circumstance, duty, and the delicate tension between failure and redemption. The Pacific had always been a cruel master, its moods shifting without warning, its waves capable of swallowing ships whole. That morning, the USS Valkyrie sailed under a deceptively calm sky. But weather reports indicated an approaching typhoon, a swirling mass of wind and water barreling toward their position faster than predicted. Rear Admiral Elena Torres studied the radar intently, her eyes scanning the storm's projected path. She had faced countless storms before, but each one was different, unpredictable, relentless, and unforgiving. Captain Ryan Cole, standing beside her on the bridge, felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. The sea had always called to him, a challenge to his skill, courage, and decisiveness. Yet today was different. He had to temper instinct with reason. Pride could no longer guide him. Torres' calm assessment contrasted sharply with the instinctual reactions that had once defined him. He realized that his decisions now carried not only the weight of protocol, but also the safety of every sailor aboard the Valkyrie. By mid-morning, the typhoon was upon them. Waves towered like steel walls. Wind shredded the deck equipment, and rain fell in torrents. turning the ship into a slippery, chaotic battlefield. The crew struggled to secure cargo, monitor instruments, and maintain communication with the command center. Every movement required precision. Every decision could mean life or death. Torres barked orders with measured authority, directing damage control teams, navigation crews, and safety officers with unwavering composure. Ryan coordinated with her seamlessly, their earlier clashes replaced by tense collaboration. Then the call came. A small reconnaissance team, dispatched to assist a civilian vessel trapped by the storm near Guam, had lost communication. The ship's sensors showed them in immediate danger, stranded amid raging waves and punishing wind. Ryan's heart pounded. Standard protocol dictated caution. They should maintain the ship's stability and wait for the storm to subside. But instinct screamed at him. Lives were at stake, and hesitation could cost them everything. "Admiral Torres," he said, voice firm but tense, "I need to lead a team out there. I can't let them perish." Torres' eyes met his. She knew the risk. The storm was powerful enough to capsize even a well-trained crew. Yet she also recognized the fire in him, the same courage that had earned his rank. "Cole," she said, her voice calm but resolute, "this is a calculated risk. You must understand the consequences. One misstep, and we could lose both your team and the ship's stability." Ryan swallowed, his jaw tightening. "I understand, but I can't do nothing." Torres nodded once, the decision made. "Go, but you will not go alone. Safety teams will support you from the Valkyrie. Maintain communication at all times." The boarding party assembled rapidly, donning protective gear, lifelines, and harnesses. Ryan took a deep breath, steadying himself against the wind and rain. He glanced at Torres on the deck above, her silhouette steadfast against the storm, a beacon of authority and guidance. The crew watched in awe as he stepped into the raging elements, fully aware of the peril that awaited. The journey to the stranded vessel was brutal. Waves crashed over the small rescue craft, rain stung like needles, and visibility was near zero. Ryan's hands were steady, but his mind raced with every possible contingency. The lives of his men, the safety of the civilians, and the success of the mission rested entirely on split-second decisions. He barked orders, shouted encouragement, and navigated the treacherous waters with precision honed from years at sea. Hours felt like days. The storm battered them relentlessly, threatening to capsize the craft with every surge. Finally, they reached the trapped team, two sailors clinging to the wreckage, terrified, exhausted, and drenched. Ryan moved with focused determination, ensuring each sailor was secured, providing reassurance even as the wind threatened to rip them apart. One by one, they were brought aboard the rescue craft, and Ryan prepared for the return journey, knowing the storm could claim them at any moment. Meanwhile, back on the Valkyrie, Torres coordinated the ship's support, directing cranes, ropes, and lifelines to stabilize the craft and ensure communication remained intact. Every command was precise, every order delivered with calm authority, inspiring confidence in the beleaguered crew below. She understood the stakes personally. Ryan's life, the lives of the team, and the integrity of the mission rested in her hands as much as his. The return trip was harrowing. Waves threatened to swamp the craft, and Ryan had to fight against the wind and currents with every ounce of strength. Each sailor aboard the rescue craft trusted him implicitly, placing their lives in the hands of a man who had just learned to temper authority with restraint. In that moment, the lessons of humility, patience, and leadership collided with courage and decisiveness, forming the crucible of experience that would define him. Finally, they reached the Valkyrie. The crew secured the rescue craft, pulling the team aboard amidst shouts of relief and exhaustion. Ryan, drenched, shivering, and battered, stood at the deck rail, gasping for breath. Torres approached, her eyes scanning him for injuries. "You did it," she said simply, her voice calm but carrying a weight of admiration and respect. Ryan's pride flared briefly, but it was tempered by exhaustion and humility. "We all made it," he said, voice hoarse. "Nobody left behind." Torres nodded, a small smile breaking through her composed exterior. "Leadership is not about acting alone, Cole. It's about ensuring no one is left behind and knowing when to act and when to rely on others. Today, you demonstrated both courage and restraint." The crew, watching from the deck, erupted in muted applause. A recognition not just of the successful rescue, but of the transformation unfolding before them. Ryan's actions had proven that bravery without recklessness was possible, that impulsive courage could be balanced with thoughtful leadership. Later, in the quiet of the captain's quarters, Ryan reflected on the storm. The adrenaline had faded, leaving exhaustion and the gravity of the day's events. He realized that his instinctive reaction to protect his team, which could have been disastrous, had been tempered by Torres' oversight and guidance. Without her calm authority, the outcome might have been catastrophic. For Torres, the storm was another lesson, not in tactics or protocol, but in human character. Ryan had shown growth, courage, and adaptability. He had faced the storm and emerged alive, both physically and morally. But she knew the true test was far from over. The storm had revealed his potential, but also the delicate balance between leadership and recklessness that would continue to challenge them both. That night, as the Valkyrie sailed through calmer waters, Ryan and Torres stood side by side on the deck, watching the storm clouds recede. The crew below moved with renewed energy, aware that their leaders had faced danger head-on and emerged stronger. The Pacific, vast and unpredictable, had tested them, but it had also forged a bond of trust and respect between two officers who had once been adversaries. Ryan glanced at Torres, the weight of his gratitude unspoken but deeply felt. "Thank you," he murmured. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable yet warm. "Do not thank me. Learn from this. Let it guide you in the days ahead. Leadership is forged in moments like these, and there will be more to come." For the first time since Norfolk, Ryan understood the magnitude of her words. The storm had been more than a test of skill or courage. It had been a lesson in humility, teamwork, and the true meaning of command. And as the Valkyrie sailed into the night, both leaders knew that their journey together, fraught with tension, challenge, and growth, had only just begun. Back in Washington, the incident aboard the USS Valkyrie had ignited a political storm as fierce as any typhoon at sea. Rumors and reports circulated through the Pentagon's halls like wildfire. Captain assaulted an admiral and remained on duty under her command. Senior officers whispered behind closed doors. Analysts drafted urgent memos, and the Navy's internal oversight committees prepared to convene. Every action, decision, and communication regarding Ryan Cole was scrutinized, dissected, and judged, leaving Torres walking a precarious line between authority and controversy. Admiral Elena Torres sat in her office, the weight of the storm on her shoulders. The screens before her displayed reports from Norfolk, statements from the crew, and political commentary on the unfolding scandal. It was not merely about a physical altercation. It was a question of judgment, leadership, and perception. Washington's scrutiny was relentless, and every decision she had made regarding Ryan Cole would be called into question. Torres' aide, a young lieutenant with a precise and unwavering demeanor, entered cautiously. "Admiral, the Oversight Committee is requesting a briefing on your rationale for retaining Captain Cole on active duty." Torres didn't flinch. "Prepare the report. Include every detail of the incident, his service record, the typhoon rescue, and the rationale for mentorship and oversight. We must present facts, not speculation." The aide hesitated. Some senior officers suggest that this will reflect poorly on you, that Washington will see it as favoritism. Elena's gaze hardened. Favoritism is the easy judgment. Leadership is the hard decision. Captain Cole made a mistake, yes. But he also demonstrated courage, skill, and growth. He deserves the opportunity to prove himself, and the Navy deserves officers capable of learning from failure. Washington, however, was not so easily persuaded. Senators, military auditors, and Navy public relations officers all sought to shape the narrative. Some whispered that Torres had shown leniency to the captain at the expense of protocol. Others argued that her decision was a demonstration of progressive leadership, recognizing human potential over rigid bureaucracy. The debates raged, echoing through committee chambers and conference rooms, each argument layered with politics, ambition, and scrutiny. Meanwhile, Ryan Cole understood that the storm of politics was a battle he had little control over. Every success at sea, every calculated act of bravery, would be weighed against the memory of his transgression. He spent hours in reflection, reviewing the storm mission, analyzing his decisions, and preparing to account for his actions. Humility had replaced arrogance. Caution had tempered confidence. And every instinct he relied on now had to be balanced with accountability. Torres, meanwhile, prepared for her own hearing. She reviewed Ryan's service record, his performance during the typhoon, and his growing maturity under her guidance. She anticipated the committee's scrutiny, the probing questions about judgment, protocol, and command decisions. Every word she would speak had to be deliberate, precise, and unassailable. The political arena was as unforgiving as the sea, and one misstep could undermine her credibility and authority. When the day of the briefing arrived, the committee chamber was tense, filled with military officers, civilian oversight representatives, and administrative staff. Torres entered, composed, her presence commanding immediate attention. Ryan followed, not at her side, but observed from a reserved position, aware that his career and his reputation rested on the outcome of this political storm. The chair of the committee, a stern admiral with decades of service, began with pointed questions. Admiral Torres, can you explain why Captain Cole remains in command under your supervision, despite a physical altercation against a superior officer? Torres' voice was calm, deliberate, and unwavering. Captain Cole did make a mistake, and I do not minimize that fact. However, leadership is not solely about punishment. It is about growth, accountability, and the ability to learn from failure. Captain Cole demonstrated extraordinary courage in decision-making during a recent typhoon rescue mission. The lives of several sailors depended on his actions. This incident revealed both his flaw and his potential. My decision to retain him under mentorship ensures accountability while fostering his development as an officer. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Questions followed, some polite, others aggressive. Senators questioned the implications of leniency. Military auditors analyzed risk. Staffers raised concerns about morale and protocol. Yet Torres remained composed, addressing each concern with clarity and evidence. She spoke of the typhoon mission in detail, the storm's intensity, the stranded reconnaissance team, and Cole's decisive leadership under life-threatening conditions. She emphasized the need for mentorship over dismissal and the value of growth forged in adversity. Ryan watched quietly. For the first time, he realized the stakes beyond the deck, the political maneuvering, the scrutiny, and the narratives that could define a career irrespective of competence. He had faced storms at sea, but the bureaucratic storm of Washington was subtler, yet equally lethal. He understood that Admiral Torres' defense was not only saving his career, but also reinforcing a principle of leadership that transcended protocol, the belief in human potential. During a break in the committee, one senior officer approached him, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity in his gaze. "Captain Cole," he said quietly, Your actions today will define your career. Do you have the humility to accept guidance and grow, or will pride undo you? Ryan met his gaze steadily. I understand the consequences of my actions, he replied. I have learned that leadership is about responsibility, courage, and accountability. I will not allow pride to dictate my decisions again. I am ready to earn trust and respect through action. Torres watched the exchange silently, a small measure of satisfaction visible in her eyes. The lesson she had sought to instill, a balance of humility and courage, was beginning to take hold. Yet she knew the committee's final judgment would hinge not only on words, but on proof of sustained growth. The Typhoon mission had been the first step. The future demanded consistency. By evening, the committee reconvened for the final review. Torres presented her closing argument, emphasizing evidence, precedent, and the value of mentorship over immediate punitive action. She highlighted Ryan's rapid growth, his developing ability to balance instinct with calculation, and his unwavering commitment to the crew's safety. She framed the decision not as leniency, but as strategic leadership, an investment in talent, resilience, and the long-term success of the Navy. The room fell silent after her statement. Members of the committee exchanged glances, weighing her arguments against precedent and politics. After a tense pause, the chair addressed the room. We acknowledge the evidence presented and the rationale for mentorship. Captain Cole will remain in active duty under direct supervision of Rear Admiral Torres. Any future incident will be subject to immediate review. The verdict reverberated through the chamber. Ryan felt a rush of relief, tempered by gratitude and renewed determination. He knew the reprieve was conditional, earned only through continued growth and proof of competence. Torres exhaled, the weight of scrutiny lifting slightly, though she remained aware that the path ahead would continue to test both officers. Later, as they returned to Norfolk aboard the Valkyrie, Ryan reflected on the magnitude of the ordeal. The storm at sea had tested courage. The storm in Washington had tested judgment and integrity. He had faced both and survived, yet he understood that leadership demanded perpetual vigilance, humility, and moral courage. Torres, observing him quietly from the bridge, noted the subtle changes. His posture was less rigid, his commands tempered, his decisions more deliberate. She knew that the storm of politics and scrutiny had forged something new in him, a cautious resilience that would serve both him and the crew well in the trials to come. That night, as the Valkyrie sailed under a calm sky, the lights of the ship reflecting in the water like stars, Ryan approached Torres. "Thank you, ma'am," he said softly, "for believing in me when no one else would." Torres looked at him, her eyes reflecting experience, wisdom, and a faint, rare warmth. "Do not thank me, Captain. Let this guide you, not pride, not fear, but responsibility. Your choices define you. Learn from them every day." Ryan nodded, understanding that leadership was no longer a title, nor a position of unchecked authority. It was a continuous trial, a balance between courage, accountability, and human judgment. And as the Valkyrie sailed into the night, both officers knew that the challenges ahead would test not only their skill and resilience, but the very foundation of trust, respect, and honor they had begun to build together. The USS Valkyrie sailed steadily toward the North Pacific, a mission of strategic importance awaiting its crew. NATO allies had coordinated an intricate joint exercise involving multiple vessels, aircraft, and simulated combat scenarios. The objective was to test maritime coordination, tactical response, and crisis management under pressure. For Captain Ryan Cole, this was more than a routine operation. It was a crucible designed to evaluate his growth, judgment, and the lessons learned under Admiral Torres' guidance. Every decision he made now would be scrutinized, both by his peers and by Torres herself. The operation began with a coordinated naval exercise, simulating a hostile intrusion into international waters. Ryan's role was to command the Valkyrie's defensive maneuvers, coordinate communication with allied ships, and ensure crew efficiency under simulated combat conditions. Every sailor was tense, aware of the high-profile nature of the mission. The presence of foreign observers added weight to their performance. Mistakes would not only reflect poorly on the Valkyrie, but could influence international perceptions of American naval competence. From the bridge, Torres observed Ryan closely. She noted the subtle differences in his command style. His orders were precise, but tempered with measured tone. He listened attentively to subordinates' input. He demonstrated restraint, even under simulated attack scenarios. Gone was the impulsive aggression that had once defined him. In its place was a growing confidence rooted in awareness, patience, and calculated action. "Captain Cole," Torres said, her voice cutting through the hum of the engines, "maintain your defensive perimeter while coordinating with the Allied destroyers. Remember, timing and precision are everything. Your crew is counting on you." Ryan nodded, issuing orders with clarity and authority. Sensors displayed simulated enemy vessels approaching the exercise zone. His crew moved with disciplined precision, executing maneuvers that had previously resulted in errors during less critical drills. This time, the response was seamless, a testament to the growth fostered under Torres' mentorship. However, the exercise quickly escalated. Unexpectedly, one of the NATO ships simulated a critical systems failure, triggering a cascading scenario that threatened the coordinated defense. Ryan had to act fast. A wrong decision could simulate catastrophic consequences, endangering Allied personnel and compromising the exercise. He glanced at Torres, seeking confirmation, but found her calm, expectant gaze fixed firmly on the operation. Trusting her confidence in him, he weighed options rapidly. He decided to reconfigure the Valkyrie's positioning, redirect communication channels, and assign damage control teams to assist the compromised ship. Each decision was precise, executed under immense pressure, with simulated explosions and warnings flashing across monitors. The crew responded flawlessly. Sailors adapted to changing scenarios, following Ryan's commands with efficiency and trust. Torres observed, impressed by the composure he exhibited under pressure. Where he had once acted with impulsive aggression, he now acted with strategy and foresight. Every adjustment, every command, demonstrated the lessons he had absorbed: accountability, patience, and measured leadership. Midway through the exercise, a final simulated crisis was introduced. A hijacked vessel approaching critical territorial waters, requiring immediate interception. Ryan's instincts screamed to act aggressively, to assert dominance over the scenario. But he paused, recalling Torres' lessons. Leadership demanded assessment, not impulse. Courage without judgment could result in failure. He coordinated a multi-step interception plan, integrating Allied vessels, aircraft support, and tactical maneuvers. Each command was deliberate, communicated with clarity and precision. The crew executed flawlessly, neutralizing the simulated threat without error. Torres, observing the operation's conclusion, allowed herself a small, rare nod of approval. Ryan had not only succeeded, he had excelled. After the exercise, the Valkyrie's deck was filled with murmurs of respect and admiration. Allied officers complimented the crew, highlighting Ryan's exceptional coordination and leadership under pressure. The crew, witnessing their captain's transformation firsthand, began to whisper not about his past mistakes, but about his competence, courage, and the steady authority he now projected. Later, in a private day briefing aboard the Valkyrie, Torres addressed Ryan directly. "You've proven your capability today, Captain. Not merely through success, but through the manner in which you led, patience, assessment, and the trust you placed in your crew. These are the hallmarks of true leadership. Ryan, exhausted but gratified, nodded. I couldn't have done it without your guidance, ma'am. You taught me to balance instinct with reason, courage with accountability. I understand now that leadership is not about asserting authority. It's about inspiring trust. Torres regarded him with a mixture of satisfaction and caution. This was a test, yes. But the seas and circumstances will continue to challenge you. Today, you've shown promise, but true leadership is proven in consistency, in the ability to make the right decisions day after day, under both calm and storm. Ryan reflected on their journey, the initial confrontation at Norfolk, the storm rescue near Guam, the scrutiny in Washington, and now this high-stakes exercise. Each trial had forced him to confront pride, fear, and impulsiveness, reshaping his approach to command. He recognized that leadership was a living, evolving skill, a continuous balance of courage, humility, and wisdom. For Torres, the exercise reaffirmed her belief in the transformative potential of mentorship and guidance. Ryan's growth was a testament not only to his innate ability, but also to the effectiveness of her approach, measured authority, patience, and the willingness to invest in potential, even when it carried risk. She knew there would be future challenges, but the Valkyrie's crew and its captain had demonstrated resilience and adaptability. That evening, the crew gathered for a rare moment of reprieve. Laughter, conversation, and camaraderie filled the mess hall. Ryan, seated quietly among his sailors, noticed the subtle shift in dynamics. Where once there had been whispered judgment and tension, now there was respect, trust, and even admiration. The captain who had once lost control now inspired confidence, a transformation forged through trials, guidance, and self-reflection. Torres approached the deck, observing the scene silently. She had always known that leadership was tested not only in crisis, but in everyday interactions, in the trust and loyalty of the crew, in their willingness to follow without hesitation, and in the morale that sustained them through adversity. The Valkyrie's crew had witnessed their captain's evolution firsthand, and the change was tangible. Ryan stepped out onto the deck, the night air cool against his skin. He gazed at the stars above, the vast expanse of the Pacific stretching endlessly beyond the horizon. For the first time since the Norfolk incident, he felt a sense of accomplishment tempered by humility. Leadership, he realized, was not about winning battles or asserting dominance. It was about responsibility, trust, and the courage to admit mistakes while striving to grow from them. Torres joined him silently. The wind carried the faint sound of waves against the hull, a rhythmic reminder of the unpredictable nature of both the sea and life. "You've done well, Captain," she said softly. "But remember, today's success does not guarantee tomorrow's. You must continue to lead with the same balance, the same awareness, and the same integrity you've shown in the past weeks." Ryan nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Every day would bring new challenges, unexpected storms, and unforeseen tests of character. But he now possessed the tools, patience, courage, humility, and strategic thinking to face them. The lessons he had learned under Torres' mentorship were no longer theoretical. They were ingrained, guiding his every action and decision. As the Valkyrie sailed onward, the bond between the captain and the Admiral had solidified, forged in fire, tempered by adversity, and strengthened by mutual respect. The crew, unaware of the depth of the mentorship, now followed their leaders with confidence, knowing that the ship was commanded by officers capable of courage, wisdom, and integrity. The North Pacific, vast and unpredictable, had served as both classroom and crucible. Ryan Cole had been tested in ways he could never have anticipated, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever before. And Admiral Elena Torres, observing him with quiet satisfaction, knew that the ultimate test had not been the storm, the political scrutiny, or the NATO exercise. It had been the transformation of a man from impulsive pride to measured, accountable leadership. For the first time since the incident at Norfolk, both leaders could see a future defined not by mistakes, but by potential, a future in which courage, wisdom, and integrity could guide them through any challenge the sea or life could throw in their path. The USS Valkyrie sailed under a calm golden sunrise, the Atlantic horizon stretching endlessly before the crew. Months had passed since the Norfolk incident, the storm near Guam, and the high-pressure NATO exercises. The ship, its crew, and its leaders had endured trials that tested skill, courage, and integrity. And now, the Valkyrie approached its final mission of the deployment, a critical humanitarian and security operation off the coast of Southeast Asia, where political tensions, natural disasters, and piracy threats converged. Captain Ryan Cole stood on the bridge, his posture steady, gaze fixed, and mind focused. The mistakes of the past were no longer shadows over him. They were lessons etched into his leadership style. He moved with measured authority, issuing orders with clarity and precision. Each command reflected a balance between courage and restraint, instinct and strategy, a harmony he had learned under Admiral Elena Torres' careful mentorship. Torres observed him from her vantage point on the command deck, the weight of responsibility and pride settling quietly over her. The journey from Norfolk to this moment had been arduous. Challenges at sea, political scrutiny, and personal trials had tested both leaders in ways unimaginable. Yet Ryan's transformation was undeniable. The impulsive captain who had once slammed an admiral against a wall had become a competent, reflective, and inspiring leader, a man capable of earning respect through both courage and wisdom. Their mission began with an immediate threat. Pirates had seized a merchant vessel, carrying essential supplies for a coastal town devastated by recent flooding. Time was critical, and negotiation was impossible. The Valkyrie would have to act decisively to prevent loss of life and secure the cargo. Ryan coordinated his officers with precision, assigning teams for boarding, security, and communication. Torres oversaw the operation, providing guidance while allowing Ryan to execute his plan. As the Valkyrie approached the hijacked vessel, Ryan's tactical acumen shone. He analyzed the pirates' movements, anticipated their responses, and adjusted his team's approach in real time. Every maneuver was calculated, minimizing risk to the crew and civilians aboard. Torres noted with approval the discipline and calm he exhibited, evidence of his growth from reckless pride to tempered leadership. The boarding operation was tense. Ryan led a small strike team, navigating the narrow, slippery deck of the hijacked ship while coordinating with the Valkyrie via secure channels. Pirates attempted to resist, but Ryan's measured approach, combined with the crew's training and cohesion, neutralized the threat without unnecessary violence. Civilians were secured, cargo protected, and the pirates subdued. As the operation concluded successfully, the crew of the Valkyrie erupted in muted cheers and applause. Ryan, exhausted and drenched from the humid tropical air, allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Torres approached him, her expression calm, but filled with unspoken acknowledgement. "You've done exceptionally well, Captain," she said softly. "Your decisions today exemplify the balance between courage, restraint, and leadership that we've been cultivating. You've proven that past mistakes do not define a leader, only their response to them does." Ryan met her gaze, understanding the depth of her words. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance, ma'am. You pushed me, challenged me, and forced me to see beyond instinct and pride. I understand now what leadership truly means." For Torres, the mission was not just a demonstration of Ryan's competence, but a vindication of her mentorship philosophy. She had taken a risk by retaining him after Norfolk, defending him under political scrutiny, and pushing him to learn from his mistakes. Today, that risk had paid off, both for the Navy and for the young captain's development. Back aboard the Valkyrie, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Crew members approached Ryan with respect and admiration, offering quiet congratulations and expressing renewed confidence in his command. Where once they had whispered doubts about his judgment, they now recognized the transformation of their captain, a leader capable of inspiring loyalty, trust, and courage. The final days of the deployment were filled with operational duties, but the tension had lifted. Exercises were conducted smoothly, maintenance performed efficiently, and morale soared. Ryan had earned the trust of the crew. Torres had secured the credibility of her decisions, and the Valkyrie itself had become a symbol of resilience, competence, and teamwork. Upon return to Norfolk, the Valkyrie was met with commendations, ceremonies, and recognition from senior officers and political figures. Ryan and Torres were called to the briefing room, where admirals, senators, and dignitaries awaited. The room buzzed with anticipation, a culmination of months of trials, challenges, and growth. The senior admiral addressing the room praised the crew's performance, highlighting the critical missions, humanitarian efforts, and the effective command displayed during high-pressure scenarios. When he turned to Ryan, his words carried both authority and respect. "Captain Cole," the admiral said, "your actions aboard the Valkyrie have demonstrated courage, judgment, and leadership under the most trying conditions. You have earned the respect of your crew, your superiors, and our international partners. Your transformation is a testament to personal growth, resilience, and the value of mentorship." Ryan's heart swelled, but he remained composed. He glanced at Torres, who offered a rare approving smile. The recognition was not merely personal. It was shared. Their partnership, forged in conflict, tested under storm and scrutiny, had succeeded in shaping not only a capable officer, but a cohesive, inspired crew. Torres was next addressed. "Rear Admiral Torres," the senior officer continued, "your guidance, judgment, and leadership have been exemplary. You have demonstrated the critical importance of mentorship, discernment, and the willingness to see potential in others, even when it is risky. Your actions have strengthened the Navy's operational and moral foundation." Applause echoed through the briefing room. For Torres, the commendation was deeply gratifying, not for personal recognition, but as validation of a philosophy she had long believed in. Leadership was not simply a position of authority. It was the cultivation of potential, the teaching of lessons through experience, and the ability to balance discipline with empathy. After the ceremony, Ryan and Torres stood on the deck of the Valkyrie, overlooking the harbor. The ship gleamed under the afternoon sun, a testament to the crew's hard work and dedication. Silence settled between them, comfortable and reflective. "You've truly changed," Torres said softly, breaking the quiet. "Not just in skill, but in perspective. The way you lead, the way you consider your crew. It's remarkable." Ryan nodded, a quiet humility in his expression. "I had a lot to learn, ma'am. But you never gave up on me, even when I doubted myself. I'll carry these lessons forward, not just for my career, but for every sailor I lead." Torres' gaze softened. "Remember this, Captain. Leadership is never static. There will always be new challenges, new storms, and new tests. But you've proven you can rise to them, and you've earned the trust to do so." Ryan took a deep breath, absorbing the weight and truth of her words. The journey from Norfolk to this moment had been arduous, filled with mistakes, lessons, and victories. He had confronted his pride, learned humility, and grown into a leader capable of earning respect not through fear, but through courage, judgment, and integrity. As the Valkyrie prepared for her next mission, the crew bustling with renewed energy, Ryan and Torres shared a look of mutual respect and understanding. The stormy past was behind them, replaced by a future defined by trust, growth, and the enduring bond forged through shared trials. For Ryan Cole, the lesson was clear. Mistakes did not define him. The courage to face them, the wisdom to learn from them, and the strength to act with integrity did. For Admiral Elena Torres, the journey was a testament to the power of mentorship, foresight, and the ability to see potential where others saw only error. And as the USS Valkyrie sailed steadily toward the horizon, the Atlantic reflecting the first light of evening, both leaders knew one undeniable truth. True leadership was not about asserting authority, winning arguments, or avoiding mistakes. It was about courage, accountability, empathy, and the unwavering commitment to guide others, even when the seas, life, and circumstance seemed impossible to navigate. The Valkyrie, her crew inspired and her leaders strengthened, sailed onward. The story of redemption, growth, and respect had reached its climax, but the lessons learned would echo across the deck, through the halls of the Navy, and within the hearts of all who had witnessed it. And somewhere deep in the hearts of Ryan Cole and Elena Torres, the understanding settled quietly, like the calm after a storm. Leadership was a journey, and they were ready for whatever came next.